Welcome to Round Hill Radio, the podcast from Round Hill Community Church. Through our conversations, we discover the holy and the ordinary, find moments of grace and peace, and redefine what we're talking about. We talk about faith. Good morning, Ed.
Good morning, Leslie.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I've been gone for ages.
It does kind of feel like it. A little bit. It's
I'm
great
back.
to have you back. Ed is back.
I missed being here.
Yeah?
I did.
Good. We've
Yeah.
missed having you. It's been wonderful. Shannon held down the fort beautifully.
Shannon is a superstar.
Stunning. Fantastic.
She's fantastic.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you, Shannon. It was really fun. She'll be back. Don't panic, everybody. We have schemes and dreams of some fun episodes with Shannon coming up. What are we talking about today?
We are talking about
That was
something.
the most graceful segue I could manage today.
It was beautiful.
It's very Monday today, and the Monday of Mondays.
Yes. So a couple things. We're exploring this wonderful book called Deeply Woven Roots by Gary Gunderson. And how local communities of faith can cultivate strengths that are good for the world. And, you know, part of what we're doing is we are reclaiming the word strength as a healing, constructive word, right? Not a word that's associated with domination, but rather something, you know, what is the strength that people need in order to live well and be gracious and kind? Because those virtues take a certain kind of strength all of their own. Yeah,
absolutely. Right? It was funny. Shannon and I, the past 2 weeks, were talking about the word discipline and how that kind of has a negative
it kind of
connotation.
Does. Yeah, it does.
So it's funny that we're now pivoting to strength and we're reclaiming it.
Yeah, we're reclaiming
for
language.
our own. Yeah, it's funny. So every time, you know, because we've been doing the different sermons over the weeks have been, you know, the strength to fill in the blank.
Yep.
And it's funny when I type that, I'm always like, I wonder if they're going to understand that. I always pause.
Yeah, right.
You know, that I want people to receive it in the spirit in which it's offered.
Yes.
So it's always kind of a funny moment where I'm like, should I change it?
Yeah.
And then I don't.
It doesn't make sense to anybody. Sometimes you just put things out there and see what the response is.
Right. So strength, how are you thinking about strength any differently these days?
Well, we did use the word resilience a little bit earlier today.
We did,
right?
Yeah.
And maybe the word resilience is already getting a little tired.
So true story. I actually almost texted Ed yesterday afternoon. I was in a conference and they were talking about resilience fatigue. And I was like, well, this is cheerful.
Yeah.
And I almost texted Ed saying, we should record about resilience. And then I thought, I think we have had an episode on resilience, which made me in turn think, well, maybe there is a resilience fatigue there. But, you know, this idea that we need to keep, you know, sort of the phrase I can think of right now is sort of feeding ourselves in a way, rejuvenating, finding new sources of energy, inspiration, what have you, which is, you know, resilience, endurance are kind of similar. Endurance, of course, I think of like endurance sports.
Yes.
So there's a lot of effort
Olympian
in that word.
proportions, right?
Are you watching the Winter Olympics?
Here and there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really like them.
I know. It's
really fun.
Amazing, right? And I have been thinking about that in terms of the relationship between strength and especially endurance. You know, you think about especially watching these cross-country skiers, you know.
Right.
25, 50 kilometers, and they're amazing.
It's so amazing. When I visited my father in Montana, we took a cross-country skiing class. That is the most singularly exhausting thing I've ever done.
So here's a fun fact. I skied cross country in college.
Really?
There it is. Little secret for you.
Mad respect. That's impressive.
It is the most exhausting sport in which I ever participated, which is why I didn't do a lot of it after college.
Oh my goodness. It's like trying to run on sand.
It's really something.
It's just like yeah. It's very fun, but also like I've been working really hard and I've gone maybe 10 feet.
I know. Yeah. So that's why people ski downhill.
Yes. Gravity is your friend.
Well, I was thinking about those skiers, because of the Olympics.
Sure.
Right. And doing that. And I guess hearkening back to my own experience, the one thing I would say that I learned in a very definitive way from cross-country skiing is that it's amazing what capacity the human body has when you think you've exhausted it.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that what we have to learn from people who've done endurance sports or some extraordinary strength training exercise. I'm also thinking about the people who do deep sea diving without any, oxygen assistance.
Oh, yeah.
And how they're down there for minutes and minutes and minutes, and how they train their body to do that.
Amazing.
There is just this extraordinary capacity in us. And maybe we sell ourselves short from time to time about that. We sort of think, oh, I can only go this far, and then I'm just going to kind of let it go.
Yeah.
And instead, of taking the approach, well, how can I kind of continue to add to this? There's a wonderful line by the poet T.S. Eliot, which says, only those who risk going too far can know how far it's possible to go.
Right.
And so I guess the message we're thinking about for this week is the strength to endure. And that, especially in the context of a justice or peace movement where people are so often, denied along the journey and have to constantly regroup and recalibrate and find new energy, and yet so often manage to do that.
Right.
So that's what's kind of on my mind these days with endurance.
Especially when it feels like you've been fighting the fight. I'm thinking in terms of justice for people who make that their life's work.
Yeah.
And the lifetimes that have been given to this.
Yeah, I was, so I've been reading Wildland, the book by Evan Osnos, The Rise of America's Fury. And he was talking about the disparity in Chicago between neighborhoods that are predominantly people of color and those that are predominantly white. And the inequity is astonishing. Yeah. And when you think that in the 1960s, Martin Luther King Jr. visited Chicago and really tried to make a statement there, found it, I think he made the claim that it was the most, there was more resistance to his movement there than he had found anywhere else, even in the South. I think that was a public comment that he made.
Yeah.
And so the struggle is still ongoing, right? It hasn't ended. So what amazing endurance it has to take, first of all, just to live in an area that is, going back to your term, less nourished than other areas in the city. Schools are not as good. Resources are not as good. Libraries are not as good. How to stay in that when there's so much against you, right?
Yeah.
That's extraordinary.
And when there's forces, that maybe if there's forces pushing against you,
right?
And you're just trying to, the effort sometimes it takes to keep even the, not status quo, but to keep things where they are and not disintegrate.
Yeah.
Right. It puts me in mind of Michelle Obama's memoir. And she talks about how this mindset of growing up in the South Side of Chicago, and she sort of saw it diminish is sort of, I think, the word she used, and she saw it sort of in decline, and how heartbreaking that was for her, because it was a very vibrant, wonderful place to grow up as a young person.
That sentiment is echoed exactly by one of the persons that Evan Osnos interviews for Wildland. He talks about this man talks about the fabric of the neighborhood when he was growing up as being so supportive of children and youth.
Yeah.
And then one by one, resources were taken away and then moved to other parts of the city, and families were broken apart, and eventually people moved away. Sure. And so those structures, that infrastructure was no longer there to support it. So, there's one show that I would wish for all of us to watch especially during Black History Month, and it's called The Black Church. It's by Henry Louis Gates of Harvard, teaches at Harvard. He narrates it, and it's just beautifully done. But talk about an institution that's been at the heart of helping people of color to endure.
Yeah.
Enormous, massive injustices over the years. The Black Church has been instrumental, and so it's really worth watching that and to see the strength, that people have brought to caring for their neighborhoods and their children and their futures, despite having, as you say, all of these forces arrayed against them.
Absolutely. And talk about incredible music.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh.
It's just
I mean, what a tradition there.
The beauty of the language.
The poetry, the harmonies. I mean, it's just, I took a class at Yale that sort of dipped our toe into that. The incredible Mark Miller taught it, and I lovingly considered it a Black professor trying to teach a bunch of white kids how to play This Light of Mine without it being cringeworthy was basically the point of the class. And oh my goodness, did we need it?
Yeah.
His point was that you do not need to be a person of color to play this music with a sense of honor to it and respect for it and enjoyment of it. And to honor it, you need to do it justice. And that sort of was an incredible gift of a class. But it also showed me, that thing where you learn a little bit and then you're like, wow, I know nothing.
Yeah.
So what a gift that was.
Have that often in life.
Yeah, I mean, basically. But it's, when you just see how much you don't know and how much just, I mean, incredible intricacy is in this music and the way they communicate nonverbally through music, tied to the jazz music of jazz music in America. I mean, just incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible.
That music that you're talking about, and you're so fortunate to have had that chance to learn with Mark Miller,
It was
right?
great. I took the class twice just so I could.
Why not? I mean, that becomes the way in which the strength is motivated, right? And activated. Yeah. Something has to mobilize and activate the strength. And quite often it's the music that does that. So, and we're still doing that. I think we've been in an endurance battle here for the last couple of years. And for so many people with poor resources, this has been a nightmarish situation, right? It's revealed so much of our country's inequity at every level.
Yeah.
And so how can communities of faith be places where people can once again tap into that wonderful inner resource that's there, but which needs the stories and the music and the community to make it come forth, or to help it come forth.
Right. And that in times of isolation, finding community is really kind of the balm.
Yeah.
To help so much.
Yeah.
And that we can be a tiny, tiny part of that. It feels like it's such a big honor. And privilege.
I think it's our calling right now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I like that tie-in. That's nice.
Do my best.
That was great. So I heard because you told me that Greenwich is mentioned in Wildland.
Greenwich plays a very prominent role in Wildland because it's one of the places where Evan Osnos lived. And so he focuses on Greenwich because he grew up here and went to Greenwich High School.
Well, there you go.
And so has some deep roots. And his grandparents were members of Round Hill Community Church.
Oh, my goodness.
So there's a wonderful connection.
Wonderful tie in there.
Yeah. And he interviewed me as part of it, but he interviewed a lot of people from Greenwich so that there's a pretty broad cross-section of people he spoke with. And I think he comes to this project as one who loves his community and is concerned about his community.
Sure.
Right? That definitely comes through, a very deep sense of wanting Greenwich to be the very best that it can be, but also talks about the concerns that come along with sometimes having these massive amounts of wealth and how some people, have procured that wealth. And he goes into great detail on a few of those stories.
Right. Well, he mentions isolation as being problematic as well, doesn't he?
Yeah. And, there's an interesting connection in the book between isolation and the fact that as the sort of context in which some people lose their moral compass. And I remember it comes through in particular with one individual he mentions who was very successful as a hedge fund manager, eventually played against the rules, wound up going to prison. And that individual talked about the fact that he was kind of operating in a smaller and smaller world all the time. And the only conversation partner he really had in this was himself.
Uh-oh.
And that turned out not to be a good conversation partner. But to your point, I think that's the isolating quality of that. And we can kind of convince ourselves of anything.
Right.
Right. And so he thought that after a while, he could justify anything. That's really where it all came down to, until he couldn't.
Yeah.
And so building community. And I think part of what we're seeing in the church now is we're slowly starting to build back.
Yeah.
Right. It's a very interesting time now where there's thankfully we see a more positive direction for the infection rates, right? That they're starting to go down. But we're also seeing people wanting to come back into the fabric of the community and experience it again. And we hope that will just continue to happen, and we'll go from strength to strength.
Absolutely. Right? And so for those of you that are watching or listening to this, the day it comes out, there's a Zoom book study on Wednesday, February 9th. Yeah.
Yeah. 5 p.m.
5 p.m.
Yep.
So you can find information on that around hillcommunitychurch.org. And if you've had a chance to read the book, we would love to see you there.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. The more the merrier.
Well, thank you for spending this time with me, Ed. I feel already a little more resilient.
That resilience fatigue is starting to drift away. Resilience is back.
It's back. Well, thank you one and all for joining us here today on Roundhill Radio. Roundhill Radio is brought to you by the friends and members of Roundhill Community Church. And we'll see you back here next week.